Hey everybody, it's probably a good idea that I give you some frame of reference about my approach to teaching this class. And you think about, we've got 5 weeks to cover microeconomics and macroeconomics, where if we were at the University of Oregon, we'd be covering just microeconomics in 15 weeks and then another 15 weeks of macroeconomics. So it's quite a daunting task when you think about what we have before us. It's 5 weeks to cover these two massive things. Plus, we're only talking about a textbook that covers both. That's there when I'm not sure where all my economic texts are, but I don't know if you can see. There's a microeconomics text right there. Oh shoot. Macroeconomic text. There's a full text. I mean, you get the idea. Enormous number of pages devoted to this subject. So we've got 5 weeks. So, which reminds me of a cute story. So this small town pastor needs to take a break. So he calls his big city pastor friend and says, "Hey Bill, hey, can you come out to my small town and do the sermon for me in a couple of weeks?" And Bill said, "Well, yeah, sure, I'll come out." So on the appointed Sunday, he shows up and gets on the platform. It's 9 o'clock, and he looks out at the sanctuary. There's just one fellow sitting in the front pew, dirty boots, coveralls, piece of straw in his mouth. And so what's he do? He turns to the guy and says, "Well, sir, it's 9 o'clock. You're the only one here. Should I start?" And so the guy says, "Well, Pastor, I own a farm down the road a piece there, and I got 13 head of cows. If I go out to feed him and only one shows up, I go ahead and feed him." So Big City Bill sort of gets the analogy of the flock and the pastor feeding the flock and says, "Okay, well, here we go." Well, not only was Bill from the big city, he was also a big talker. Turns out that the normal 45-minute sermon that this gentleman was expecting was 3 hours long. And so finally Bill finishes. He turns to the gentleman. He's quite proud of himself, by the way. He turns to the gentleman and says, "Well, sir, how'd I do?" And the fellow says, "Well, Pastor, I said I had this farm down the road piece with 13 head of cows, and if I go out to feed him, only one shows up. I don't feed him the whole bale of hay." I just love it. Anyway, so what's the analogy? What's the point of the story? Well, a bale of hay is all of this stuff on economics. We got 5 weeks. We can only take a small bite. So what's my role? Well, my role is to go through that book, chapter by chapter, and help identify what are the salient points, what are the real takeaways, and a few of those hopefully will stick. I laughingly think, if I run into you in a Starbucks, 2 years from now, and I say, "Hey, Bill, what do you remember from that class?" And hopefully there'll be something. Anyway, so my approach is to help you by pulling out what I say, and this is obviously it's my bias, but it's my bias, which has been derived over years of teaching economics. So, what are the real takeaways? What are the things that I might personally embrace for me in my own understanding of economics and how it applies to me in my personal life? And then what are the takeaways that apply in the business world? And so that's my role. Now, on the online environment, it's a little harder to do that. We don't have sort of this freewheeling conversation where we can sort of, touch and spin off of one another as I bring up or isolate certain topics. But we'll do okay. That's the point of these discussion groups, is to have this exchange, and I'll try to elevate those, and I'll post some one-off lectures as need be. But let's get right to the point, though. There's 5 economic principles that I think are really key takeaways that are covered in these opening chapters. The first one, which I touched on in my article I posted, is opportunity cost, which is like, as I said in my thing, you got to teach your kids this. Dollar stores or Dollar Trees are a great place to do this. But here's the point. if the essence of economics is studying our decisions with regards to, or our choices for that matter, with regards to the scarcity of resources, in other words, we have something, we have a resource, and we're going to then use that resource to acquire something else. And both the resource is limited, unless you're Bill Gates with billions and billions on the dollar side, but he's got other limitations that are just as true to him as they are to us. And if we were together in a room, I'd say, what's a common resource that we all have, but not necessarily in equal amounts? And my guess is I'm the oldest one in the room, therefore I have less of it, potentially, than many of you. So if you're reading my mind, you've already figured out it's time. So time is a resource, and we take that time and we allocate it, we spend it. And what we spend it on is limited as well. We have limited a time that we can devote to sleeping or to studying. So opportunity cost is making reference to, what do we sacrifice, what do we give up, what's the cost of the opportunity that we take. So if I have $1 to spend, if my kid has $1 to spend at Dollar Tree, by expending that resource to buy something, he's now, and that's his opportunity, but with that opportunity comes a cost, meaning now he can't buy something else. He can buy the bag of marbles, but he can't buy the fiddle faddles. So opportunity costs, critical. Matter of fact, and there's a dollar value associated with that as well. We'll talk about that maybe another time. Let's talk about the law of diminishing returns, another important concept, particularly in manufacturing or productivity, or even in our own personal lives. The notion is that sometimes the more we do, the less efficient or less productive we become. You can easily think about that in terms of studying. You know, if you just study hour after hour after hour without eating, without sleeping, there's a point at which, you know, your retention, your ability to pay attention starts to diminish. We can think about being in a McDonald's and watching the workers in the back do their manufacturing process of creating this fast food. But imagine that progressively more and more people got added to that workspace, to the point at which they start to get pretty crowded. And although they were very efficient and timely in the beginning, as that space filled up with more and more workers, then the ability to have access to the equipment in the same efficient way would diminish. And so collectively their productivity would diminish. So that's that notion of that, you know, we add productivity to the point at which all of a sudden now the machines that we need for productivity are less available because it's crowded. And all of a sudden now we're still producing, but we're not producing at the same rate we were before. So law of diminishing returns, it certainly applies to us personally, as I said, in the case of studying, case of sleep, case of nutrition, case of just how we spend our time. Sometimes we can, and so again, it's a law that's come through the result of scientific research among economists to appreciate that this seems to be the way the world works. Let's talk about number 3, marginal benefit. Marginal benefit, sort of technical language, sometimes called utility benefit. The idea here is that economists want to help us understand the decision-making process and how we get from point A to point B. In this case, and it's sometimes easier to think about it in both, we can think about both personal and again business terms. But think about that, you know, the business that's trying to decide, should I stay open 1 hour later? Should I hire one more person? Should I manufacture one more dozen of something? What's the incremental value or benefit? What's the marginal being that extra piece, if you will, one additional piece? What's the marginal benefit of doing that one more time or adding one more thing? And there's a financial analysis that the textbook talks about, how you determine what is your fixed cost, your average cost, and then your marginal cost, and then your marginal revenue. And you can sort of begin to determine at that point in the equation, when does it make sense to add that one more hour of being open, or one more employee, or one more dozen of whatever you're manufacturing. So marginal benefit is a very important point. There's an interesting YouTube on Khan's Academy called Marginal Benefit, where he talks about the difference between of when we have, for example, the choice of buying chocolate versus fruit, and where their cost is slightly different and their utility or benefit to us is slightly different. But we still have to choose between them. For example, we have $1. We have $1 to purchase a chocolate, or we have $1 to purchase a half a pound of cherries. What do? Okay, well, we choose, say, to buy the chocolate with our first dollar. Let's say we have a total of $5 to spend. So the second dollar, now what do I do with it? Well, the first dollar, I received a lot of satisfaction, benefit, utility, if you will, from that first bar of chocolate. But I really like chocolate. And so I think I'm going to take my dollar and I'm going to buy a second chocolate bar because I really get a lot of benefit from it. So now I have my third dollar to spend. Now I could buy the cherries, or I could buy a third bar of chocolate. But I'm still really interested in that chocolate. I mean, it just, who could say no? I know it's not the best choice between chocolate and cherries, but still. So I have this, but I'm not going to get quite as much satisfaction from it. That's the issue. Not quite as much utility or marginal benefit. We're talking about marginality, aren't we? Because the marginal benefit of buying one, then buying one more, and buying one more. And as I do that, the marginal benefit changes. The marginal benefit of that first chocolate was fantastic. Second one, a little less. The third one, not quite sure if it's even justified. So now all of a sudden, now I'm looking at the satisfaction benefits of having these cherries, and all of a sudden now I shift. Well, you get the point. But think about it again from your own personal perspective. When you've got this text to read, and there's other things to do, what is the marginal benefit of spending one more hour reading versus one more hour playing with your kids or your pets or going for a run or some other activity? What's the marginal benefit of that? Is that marginal benefit going to increase your grade by X points? Is it going to increase your capacity to take that knowledge and retain it or utilize it? That's the analysis that we have to go through. And a lot of us go through that analysis rather quickly and sometimes not very precisely, maybe not even in a rational way, but nevertheless it's a process that we need to go through. Okay, that's so we've talked about opportunity costs, law of diminishing returns, and marginal benefit. The third one is this notion of incentives. Economists understand that we all collectively, individually, respond to incentives, something that gives us some benefit. If we do X, we get Y. And the notion is then that if we respond to incentives, then what kinds of incentives and how do we evaluate incentives, and how can incentives both be used to promote positive behavior versus what incentives can be used to negate negative or decline or diminish negative behavior. So we think about this from policy behavior, or even think about this from a parenting perspective. When do we say, hey, Johnny, if you go clean your room, you can have an extra hour of Nintendo? Or government says, ABC Corp, if you don't stop polluting, there'll be a cost, a disincentive, in other words, if you don't stop polluting. So you can see how the incentive concept can be used behaviorally to increase the positive behavior that we want, both out of individuals and society, or to diminish or decrease. Johnny, if you don't clean your room, you got to get a, spanking, I suppose. Do people even do that anymore? So incentive is a very important thing. There's an interesting study. It's called gradient theory. It's sort of interesting. So imagine that you've got two different coffee shops that you go to. And you go into the coffee shop and the guy says, hey, I'm rolling out a new program to encourage my customers to do business with me. And so I'm going to give you this punch card. You guys have all seen these, And the punch card has 10 punches on it, and when you get all 10 punched, you get a free drink. So your 11th one is free. So he gives you this card. You haven't even purchased it. And he gives you a card, and the first one's already punched. So you only got 9 left to purchase before you get your free drink. And then you go down the street to the competition. And this guy is a little bit more thoughtful about it. He's looked at the behavioral research, in fact. He understands gradient theory, which works like this. So he gives me a card. He says, well, hey, Greg, here's a card. It's got 12 punches on it. When you get all 12, the 13th drink is free. Of course, the other one was a little bit better. But when he gives me that card, number 12 is punched, number 11 is punched, and number 10 is punched. So I've got 9 left over here to get my free one. I've got 9 left over here to get a free one. But which one will I utilize or go to more often than the other? Well, gradient theory will tell us the more we view or perceive ourselves getting closer to the finish line, i.e. that free coffee, the faster we will pursue that path. All right, so if we got these 2 punch cards, right? One punch card shows I got 1 clicked with 9 to go. The other one shows I've got 3 clicked with 9 to go. So the perception is that I've moved further, and therefore I'm going to move faster to get my end because I appear closer, even though in fact they're both equal. So again, incentives can work a lot of different ways with us. If you take a marketing class and other courses in behavioral decision making, it's a very interesting concept, and certainly one for great, for self-understanding. All right, so that's the 4th one. The last one's called the spillover effect, and you're very familiar with this. Not that terminology. And the other terminology is externality of our choices. I love that. Okay. One of the issues of economics is terminology, right? Like marginal and spillover and elasticity, which we'll talk about another time. Spillover effect, the notion that I'm going to make a choice, you're going to make a choice, but some of the choices that we make aren't just, don't just impact us. They impact those around us, society perhaps in general as well. Simple one to think about is if you were a smoker and you're standing next to somebody that doesn't smoke, well, the smoke is in their space as well. So there's a spillover effect from my choice to smoke. Same thing, somebody that drinks and drives, there's a spillover effect if they hit somebody or damage something. Companies that pollute, spillover effect from the choices they're making. So this goes on and on and on, obviously. It's a very significant issue in society is the spillover effect or the externality. But externality isn't always negative, right? We also make positive choices, or choices, I should say, that have, when they spill over, have a positive impact on those around us. For example, if you live a healthy lifestyle, which combination of exercise and diet, etc., well, then you're less likely to need health care. And if you're less likely to need health care, then you're less of a financial burden on the healthcare system, which then frees it up to service those that need health care. So there's an example. If you educate yourself, as you all are, of course, you now become more employable. You then become more productive, a greater contributor to society in the form of generating productivity earnings. Those earnings gets taxed, so now those tax dollars go to the government that serves all of us. So there are definitely some positive externalities of the choices we make too. So in summary, we've got 5 key economic points of view, philosophies, theories, practices that we all should understand very carefully and apply them as well to ourselves as we to the world around. Again, just to reiterate. So we have opportunity cost, which I just love that concept. Make sure you teach your kids. It's a great concept. Law of diminishing returns. certainly true in both personal and business life. 3, marginal benefit, as we said. What's that incremental cost and benefit of doing something one more time, if you will? Incentives, we respond to incentives, both positive and negative. And finally, spillover effect, or the externality of both our positive choices that we make, as well, the choices that we make that both have a positive and a negative. Well, I hope this clarifies a little bit. I know we're still making just a little bit of a nibble out of that bale of hay, but stick with us. It's a great subject. I love economics, such a personal application, particularly in this time of we got an election year going on, lots of things to pay attention to there. So anyway, stay tuned. Hopefully I'll post some more of these. But anyway, keep with it. Bye.